Hello, welcome to a new edition of At Home with the Roosevelts. I'm Paul Sparrow, the director of the FDR Library. Today we're going to talk about FDR's leadership. And one of the amazing skills he had was picking the right person for the right job at the right time, particularly true among his military leaders. He put together an extraordinary team during World War II, and sometimes ignoring seniority and protocol in the process of doing it. One of the questions we're going to ask today is about the relationship between FDR and Dwight Eisenhower, and specifically, what was it about Dwight Eisenhower's leadership that allowed FDR to select him for these incredibly important roles? And joining us today to answer that question is Dawn Hammett, the director of the Eisenhower Library. Dawn, welcome.
Hi, Paul. Thank you so much. What a delight to be here with you today.
So what do you think? What was the qualities that Eisenhower presented that made Roosevelt choose him first for the invasion of North Africa and then for the invasion of Normandy and D-Day? What was it about Eisenhower that really attracted FDR?
Well, I think it makes sense to point out that Eisenhower had an amazing relationship with General Fox Connor. And Fox Connor took him under his wing, took Eisenhower under his wing, and helped him develop some of his military lessons or his military knowledge. Fox Connor mentioned Eisenhower to General Marshall, and General Marshall introduced Eisenhower to FDR as well.
Now, Marshall was the chief of staff, and of course, at the point of when Roosevelt had to choose a leader for the D-Day invasion, everyone thought it was going to be Marshall, but it ended up being Eisenhower. So they have a complicated relationship.
They have a complicated relationship, but I don't think that FDR felt that he could do without Marshall in Washington at that time. And Marshall was an incredible administrator and a sounding board for FDR.
One of the first really important meetings between the two of them took place in Casablanca after the North Africa invasion. It was a difficult time for Eisenhower. He wasn't sure whether he was going to get fired or whether he was going to get promoted.
Yeah, it was quite a show for the Americans after the invasion of Africa, don't you think?
I wonder what it was like for Eisenhower as he's going into that room with Churchill and Roosevelt and all of the military leaders on both sides, and having to sort of justify everything that had happened up till then.
One of the things I've been amazed about Eisenhower is his ability to remain calm. Don't get me wrong, he could lose his temper like the best of men, but when he really needed to be calm and smooth with his delivery, he was really masterful. So I'm sure that he was internally very nervous about that, but I bet he displayed himself in an amazing way.
I think one of Eisenhower's most successful characteristics was his ability to get along with a wide range of people, and probably why he was given the title of Supreme Allied Commander for the D-Day invasion. He had very, very difficult people to work for, like Bernard Montgomery in the British military, George Patton, and of course Winston Churchill. And once he was in England planning for the D-Day invasion, Winston Churchill was, let's just say, in his face quite a bit. How did Eisenhower manage to balance all of these competing egos and competing agendas and launch the most ambitious amphibious attack in the history of the world?
So I think it's a few things. Number one, he was an incredibly humble man. He knew his talents, he knew what he was good at, but he wasn't. He didn't have a big ego about it. But I think that he was able to establish this sort of diplomatic relationships within all of the other layers, all the other Allied commands, Churchill himself. I think his innate diplomacy really showed well during this time for him.
You have a new permanent exhibit at the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum, and one of the things you highlight there is directly connected to D-Day. Do you want to talk about that?
We do, sure. So we did a major renovation of our exhibit galleries recently. It just opened to the public last fall, and we were able to sort of reimagine how we interpret D-Day and Eisenhower's involvement in the D-Day planning. We have, at the Eisenhower Presidential Library, we care for 3 pretty amazing objects related to D-Day. One is one of the D-Day planning tables. Another is the in case of failure note that Eisenhower penned, or penciled rather, and stuck in his pocket. And then the third is the model of the Mulberry Harbor. So the model of the Mulberry Harbor, as you well know, is the model that was used to explain the concept to Churchill. Churchill gave the model to President Roosevelt, and the Roosevelt Presidential Library then transferred it to the Eisenhower Presidential Library. So we are still very proud to share this with our public. Thank you.
Well, I think that the table, the planning table, is one of those objects where you realize the history that happened right there, the men sitting around that, the decisions they were making, tens of thousands of lives hanging in the balance, and that Eisenhower would handwrite a note saying, if anything goes wrong, it's my fault. It's so dramatic.
It really is dramatic. And you know that he wrote the wrong date on that piece of paper. He wrote July 5th. No one really knows why. We don't know if it was nerves or we just don't know. But to see that piece of paper, to see that graphite on the paper and know that it was written by his hand, it was from his heart, it's an incredibly moving piece of paper.
So you put tremendous effort into developing and designing this new permanent exhibit at the Eisenhower Library. And what is your favorite part of it?
I think for me, the most important piece of our development is to share this story with a new group of people who don't have a personal connection to World War II. How do we explain the whole time period that the war encompassed? How do we explain a global conflict? And to be able to figure that out and engage the visitor in a different way was really important to us at the Eisenhower Presidential Library. We have a film. We have two really great films, actually. We have one film that's more of a graphic that shows the expansion and contraction of the land mass that's occupied by the Allies or the Axis powers. All of the battles, there's video within it to show some of the battles. And I think that that's a real visual representation of a global war and how long it actually took, because this film starts with Manchuria. So I think it's been a great way for us to reimagine how to tell this tale, how to tell this incredible epic story to people who really just don't remember it.
We find the same challenges with the Roosevelt era, that it's ancient history to so many people today. Of course, many of the issues that they faced then we're once again facing now: economic upheaval, income inequality, environmental catastrophe. So it's very interesting that the issues that our presidents were dealing with 75, 80 years ago are once again confronting our leadership. But now I realize you're closed now, like we are, but what about the public response when you first opened?
We had so many amazing comments. Thank yous from veterans, families of veterans, just delighted to see this story retold. A lot of our teacher guests told us that we really hit the mark for some of the educational pieces that we wanted to hit. We had a lot of gratitude. So we did have the accolades, which are lovely, but those people who came up to us and said, thank you for doing this, those were really the meaningful comments.
Well, the question I always have about people when they're deeply immersed in one life, especially of these historic figures, is what's the part of his personality, what's the part of his story that you most relate to?
The general knowledge that we all have about this man, he was astounding. He was amazing. But when I learned this very human aspect, it made him touch my heart more. So he was not a very good student, not when he went to West Point. He graduated West Point in the bottom middle of his class, and he graduated with an awful lot of demerits because Eisenhower had a playful streak. And so when he graduated, World War I begins, and he doesn't progress in his ranks as often or as quickly as some of his classmates. And we believe that he recognized and equated it with perhaps I didn't do very well in school. And then he was never any less than number one in his class. So when he went on to the War College, when he went on to the Command and General Staff College, he was never less than number one in his class. And to me, that's really a very human moment of, we can change things in our lives. We can recognize that I might not like whatever's going on and I can fix it.
That's great. So I want to end with one of my favorite photographs of Roosevelt and Eisenhower. And there aren't that many photographs of the two of them together. It's very interesting. But at the Tehran conference, the Big Three conference with Churchill and Stalin, when Churchill and FDR committed to the May 1944 invasion of France, Stalin said, well, who's going to be the Supreme Commander? And they hemmed and hawed, but they said, well, we haven't selected one yet. And he said, it's all nonsense until you select a Supreme Commander. And so on his way back from Tehran to the United States, FDR says, okay, I guess I got to make a decision. And he flies to North Africa and he meets with Eisenhower. And there's a photograph of the two of them in a Jeep. And the expression on their faces is so classic. And this was one of these historic moments. I mean, the fate of the war hung in the balance of who was going to be the commanding. And then you look at that picture and you see these two men realizing that they gave everything for their country. And this is a moment that really captures it.
I know that photograph well, and I love their faces.
Well, Dawn, thank you very much for joining us today here at Home with the Roosevelts. And I can't wait to get out and see your permanent new exhibit.
Please do. Abilene's always waiting for you.